morning, everyone, and live from Vienna, Austria, it's Saturday morning. How is everyone this week? So, this weekend, you might know that Western Christians are already celebrating the quiet of Holy and Great Saturday when the Lord lies in his tomb on this Holy and Great Saturday for them. The Lord is not inactive, but it's very quiet as far as the surface goes when he's harrowing hell and getting ready to emerge from the tomb that could not hold him. Those of us on the Orthodox Church's calendar, most people in the Orthodox Church today are celebrating Lazarus Saturday, when the Lord comes to Bethany and raises from the dead his friend Lazarus. So, as a precursor or assurance beforehand, before Christ himself resurrects a week later, right? We get a foretaste of that paschal joy, celebrating the raising from the dead of Lazarus, whom everybody was grieving, his sisters, Martha and Mary, and the community in Bethany. There was really this grief that even the Lord was moved to weep. Jesus wept, we learn in John 11 in the shortest verse in the New Testament. So this was true grief, but it unexpectedly turned to joy and new life when the Lord raises his friend from the dead on the fourth day. I love this feast, especially this year when, there are inexplicable things that are dragging on connected to this pandemic of the coronavirus. We don't know exactly what this is leading us to, but we know as Christians that whatever is happening in our lives, right? Whatever it is moving us towards new life because we're always on the way of the cross. I don't want to insult your intelligence by being preachy today, but I'm simply sharing with you that uh, I feel like it's very helpful to me to remember that if I'm sensitive to the wisdom unfolding and the different ways in which I am given to experience Lent and Great Week or Holy Week or Strasnaya Nedelia, Passion Week this year, and Pascha, this is something different, but it's an adventure that's leading me to new, uh, aspects, to discover new aspects of our faith that I might not have noticed had I gone through this liturgically high season in the habitual ways, in the usual way that we do. So I just want to take heart, my friends, together with you and walk through this upcoming, for most of the Orthodox Christians, upcoming Holy Week, that we don't miss the opportunity, not miss the opportunity to learn those new things. Now, I want to mention um, that if you're interested in joining us and being accompanied on a daily basis, I'm going to be continuing what I've been doing already for months, my morning coffee audio podcast. So all of the days of Great Week, I'm going to be doing a podcast. It's about half an hour long every morning. So it's called Morning Coffee. The idea is that you learn all of the specifics, but not just, in a very dry way, all of the specifics of that day's liturgy, of the hymnography, some of the hymns we cover, some scripture readings. And so we're sort of covered insofar as being informed. It's not the actual services, right? There is live streaming of services, I know, at many parishes and at many dioceses, you have services, right? But this is some of the background information. So, like sort of making sense of it all insofar as being informed. Why, what is being, done by the church throughout that structure of Great Week. So join us if you're interested, patreon.com. It's only $5 for a whole month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Try it out. We have a lot of new people signed on, and we have a vibrant, exchange. People exchange notes as to how they are celebrating at home, what they are doing. Check it out. Don't miss out. So as we proceed, today like I said, it's Lazarus Saturday. Tomorrow it is Palm Sunday. So I am noting here that in honor of our Palm Sunday, this is the closest I could come today to noting that fact right here with this plant. And for Western Christians, I have my little prop, these Easter eggs, a basket of Easter eggs to say Happy Easter to you people. Have a blessed transition to Pascha from this holy and great Saturday. And thank you for tuning in. We're going to be discussing how we can begin Great Week. You know that there's usually bridegroom matins, as they're called, or also the chanting of Behold the Bridegroom, because, you know, there is this accentuation of the parable of the 10 virgins, the five foolish ones and the five wise virgins, that, you know, there is a way to keep vigilance, to increase our vigilance as we transition into the period of the final footsteps of the Lord before his cross. So we are called to have our lamps lit, and there is this famous hymn, Idu onim fios, right? Sier жених грядет в полуночи. Behold, the bridegroom comes at midnight. And so we want to look up, there are musical resources on YouTube also, or I think most prominently on YouTube. You could look up these hymns and sing them in your houses. Aside, you know, learn them aside from following the services. You might do certain uh, processions, or, you know, little rituals of lighting a candle. Obviously, on Palm Sunday, you want to get some branches if that's possible for you, right? Process with them, do something, you know. I'm sure people have a lot of ideas online and they're sharing them that are better than things that I mention. But with, you know, the first 3 days of Holy Week, there's this idea of vigilance. So also preparation, preparing your lamp. So in various ways, we can also participate in that, maybe cleaning the place up, you know, doing that kind of preparation, preparing some lanterns if you have kids, you know, something like that. That's very expressive physically of the whole idea of vigilance and the 10 virgins. Then, when we reach Holy and Great Thursday, when maybe many of us will not be able to go to Holy Communion, I don't know what it's like in your neck of the woods, but in any event, we do remember, commemorate, celebrate the mystical supper, or the Last Supper on Holy Thursday, also how our Lord washed the feet of his disciples to say, you know, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, you know. Like that's why it's called Maundy Thursday in certain Latin traditions. Maundy from mandatum, which means commandment. This is just a fun fact, my friends. But that commandment, you know, the new commandment that I give to you, mandatum novum do vobis, I give you a new command. Zapovедь новую даю вам, да любите друг друга. So on Holy Thursday, if nothing else, we do remember that commandment. We might want to do some foot washing of one another. Usually occurs in cathedral churches, right? And in other churches, the rite of foot washing. If you have more than one person, because washing your own feet, I think if you live alone, doesn't really express the point of serving others. But, you know, in your family, the whoever is the boss in your family, let the boss wash the other's feet. Or if you're a couple, wash each other's feet, right? I don't know if that sounds super weird to you, but it is a ritual that is done on Holy Thursday. Maybe we could do, you know, read that part of the gospel that talks about these moments, you know, and do some ritual action. It might, you know, if you approach it carefully and with preparation, sort of be cool, you know, to experience that in your home. All right. Um, so, you know, because the Lord shows by washing the disciples' feet uh, that this is the way you should be serving as ministers in the church, that the pastoral ministry in the church is that of service, not one of, you know, power over other people. So that important lesson also to all of us about how to approach one another is something, that we reaffirm on Holy Thursday. Anyway, then Holy Thursday evening, there will be the 12 Gospels, the Passion Gospels. So as best as we can do it in our situation at home, we want to stay close to Scripture, stay close to the events that we accompany the Lord and participate in those events, right? Participate in the events of the Passion and then the events leading up to the discovery of the fact that the tomb is empty and of his resurrection in the flesh. Okay, so we want to be there, stay close in a way, I think, in a different way, but perhaps a more attentive way even than we ever have before. Who knows, right? And as we do, I'll be, if you're on the Patreon podcast already, then you know what I'm talking about. But I will be discussing these things. I will be sharing the text and some of the ideas of what to do on which day, and we'll be doing it together. Um, so we want definitely to mark Holy and Great Friday with the appropriate solemnity and mark the hours of the day that we know according to the Gospels that what happened when, right? So traditionally, it would be a very strict fast up to around 3 p.m., 3 noon, 3 afternoon. 3 noon is a concept that not every time zone has. I meant 3 afternoon in any event. So at 3 in the afternoon, around that time, according to the sundial, that's not so exact because it's not a mechanical clock. It's known as the 9th hour. The Lord breathed his last and died on the cross. So until that hour, we try to be as silent as possible, right? And fast very strictly. And then there is this somehow in some way when we can come and worship the Lord in his tomb, all right, because we would have the pleshtenitso or epitafios brought out in the church and some kind of you know place where you could place either, say, the cross. I don't know if you don't have anything that resembles something like the epitafios, which I don't. So I would be venerating the cross at that time. Um, and then, onwards to Holy and Great Saturday, besides the aspects, these, liturgical, textual, also hymns and things that we might, discover if you don't know what is sung, what is chanted, the main famous chants of the period. You want to look them up. You could look these up. Again, I will be mentioning them on my little podcast, but there are other materials, contents available online. I just want to say that we can also be preparing through cooking, as I'm sure you know, if you have kids or even if you don't and you like to bake. You could be preparing some of the paschal breads that our various Orthodox and other cultures have for Easter. So you want to be doing some baking if you're into that, dyeing the Easter eggs. All of that can be done. And if we make a schedule of it to make every day special this upcoming week, all right? In a way, really, that is an adventure. So let's do that together insofar as we can. And also, if you're not interested in the audio podcast, do keep in mind that I do provide a daily reflection on scripture via email. So you can go to our website that's now new and improved. It's a little improved. We have a web designer that is working very well on our website to revamp it. Anyway, sign up simply by typing in your email address here, and you can get the daily brief reflection via email on a passage of scripture that's relevant to the liturgical day. Okay? All right. So, having said all that, I want to welcome now our very special guest that I'm really very honored to have on our show today, a renowned liturgical scholar who is a Roman Catholic Jesuit priest and professor at Boston College. Professor John Baldovin, whom I know since I was studying under the direction of Professor Robert Taft, who is also an American Jesuit that is a very renowned scholar, or he was. Um, he would introduce me to some of his very illustrious friends. And Father John Baldovin, I am honored to say, I have known for some years. He is the professor of historical and liturgical theology at the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. He is a priest of the New York province of the Society of Jesus. He's really a very lovely person, as you will see, and I hope you enjoy what he has to share with us, his insights, um, of this not only, uh, very accomplished scholar and professor of liturgy, liturgical theology, both from a very knowledgeable historical perspective, because he's done what Taft would have called the heavy lifting and really studying the sources. He's made major contributions. Like I remember, and sometimes I need it, time and again. He has a book that was his doctoral dissertation, first published, I believe, in 1987, then republished, I think, in 2002, The Urban Character of Christian Worship, which was a very important study on the history in three different liturgical centers in the Christian world, Rome, Jerusalem, and Constantinople, of stational liturgy. Stational liturgy was this uh, custom in various cities in the ancient world to move, throughout a city and have a certain prayer, rite uh, according to the different stops one made throughout the city in procession. So this influenced heavily, of course, the Byzantine rite, but also the Roman rite, this movement during liturgy, because we still have processions in liturgy. They look not entirely different, but quite different from what they used to be as part of city life, bringing liturgy out into the streets. So the urban character of Christian worship is something that Father John Baldovin, when he was just, getting his doctoral dissertation, really dived into and told us a lot about, having dug it out of the sources of these ancient liturgies, both in East and West. So I think as we experience liturgy now in our homes and only, outside the church walls in our cities, or in any event, not within the church walls, this is also a relevant topic to remember, just to remember a time when there was more of a city liturgy. Now, for very different reasons, we've moved our devotions, so to say, into a more, what we would usually consider the more profane, if I could put it that way. Some people would say there's nothing profane about God's world, but what I'm saying, it's outside of the church's walls. So I should tell you just a few more things about Father John Baldovin, who has really the kind of CV that somebody of his caliber would have. So I can't cover everything, all of his accomplishments, but I'll tell you from his background, so you just know a little bit more in case you don't know about him. He was born in Clifton, New Jersey, of Northern Italian heritage. So his father was born in Northern Italy, but also his mother's parents were born there. Now, Father John's father was a sales manager of Ballantine beer and not college educated. And his mother was a homemaker, also not college educated. So this illustrious scholar, Father John Baldovin, does come from, second generation Northern Italian American Roman Catholic also family. Both his parents were Roman Catholic, And I asked him, were they devout? And he said, well, they weren't devout, but they were faithful. They were solid Roman Catholics. They went to Mass every Sunday. Father John grew up with one sibling, but he was 9 years younger than his only sibling, a sister, and she went to college 10 years earlier than he did. So both of them went to college. To tell you briefly about Father John's education, he received his bachelor's degree from the College of the Holy Cross. He received an MDiv, Masters of Divinity, from Weston School of Theology, and from Yale University, 3 degrees, an MA, a Master's of Philosophy, and a PhD. Professor Baldovin has teaching experience both at Fordham University, where he taught at the Jesuit School of Theology at Berkeley. He has been visiting professor at the University of Notre Dame, at the Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome, and like I said, he is now already for many years at Boston College as professor of historical and liturgical theology. What else can I tell you about Father John Baldovin, my friends? Well, his research interests, besides the historical, study of the sources of the development of liturgy, he's also interested in the sacramental theology of Christian worship. He has also written extensively on the issue of the Vatican II reforms of Roman Catholic liturgy. Father John is fluent in 5 languages besides his native English. He has served as, on various positions in prominent academic societies, but also served on important church commissions and continues to serve, besides his full-time job of being a professor at a major and prestigious university. He has served as the president of the Societas Liturgica. He has served as president, vice president, and I believe treasurer of the North American Academy of Liturgy. He serves on the board of directors of the academic journal, Theological Studies. He has served as associate editor of Worship. I have an issue right here. I have been on the editorial board of Worship. He has been on the editorial board of Studia Liturgica. I mean, the list goes on, my friends, but these are quite prestigious positions. But I don't want to be in any way evaluating one of the great masters of liturgiology. He has been the recipient of the Beraka Award of the North American Academy of Liturgy. I was there when he received it, actually, at that conference of the NAAL. It was in 2007 in Toronto. He has been on several committees of an important commission of the Roman Catholic Church. He's been on the Advisory and Consultants Committee and the Translations and Revisions Committee of something known as ICEL, that is the International Commission on English in the Liturgy. So the people who revise the English translation, if you hear about issues in the Roman Catholic Church, for example, like the word consubstantial, that wasn't being used in the Roman Catholic rite, a few years ago, and then it was changed. What did they used to say instead of consubstantial? One in essence, and then, it was revised. Anyway, so Father John has a lot to do. I don't know which side of the discussion he was, because there is something known as the liturgy wars in Roman Catholicism that I don't know if in our Orthodox Church people care enough about the liturgy that we would have entire wars and these major discussions around liturgical issues. At least, I've been around for a while and I haven't noticed that people care all that much about what's going on in liturgy. I'm not trying to put us down, people. I mean, we just have different church cultures, but so what if I did put us down? It's my family, so I can be self-critical, right? All right, enough. I am going to stop talking, and I'd like for us to give a warm round of applause for our special guest, Father John Baldovin, S.J.
Hello, Sister Vassa. How are you?
Well, I'm wonderful. I
Good.
can't believe you're on my show, and thank
Ah,
you so much for doing this. I was telling my viewers that what occasioned our reconnecting is that you wrote me and asked me whether I have this sort of.
yes, there it is. Yes, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's the
yeah.
students who did this, collected sayings of Father Robert Taft. I
Right.
put up his little photo here.
Yes, I see that. That's great. Yeah.
uh, in your honor as well. So, Father John, we'll get right to the questions of the interview. Okay.
Sure, sure.
Tell us, first of all, how you are holding up in this whole coronavirus time, and where are you? Because that's quite a background you've put up for us. Thank you for that.
Right,
And
right.
sorry, I should just add that you are doing this interview with me during Holy Week or Great Week for
That's
Catholics.
correct. Great week
Thank you.
yeah, great week for you, but it's not Holy Week for you yet, right?
No, we're 1 week away. So
Okay.
I've got, see, this is an honor. It's the closest thing I could get to palm branches. And I've got some Easter eggs,
Oh, excellent. Good.
albeit plastic ones. It's a prop, but
Good.
in your honor, so as to, I call it in the interest of calendar solidarity.
Good. Excellent. Good. Good.
All right.
That's
So,
terrific. Yeah. So here I am in Holy Week. I I'm currently on sabbatical, as you know. I teach at Boston College School of Theology and Ministry, but I have this semester as a sabbatical, and so I came out to the College of the Holy Cross, where I am an alumnus, actually, where I graduated 50 years ago. And I came out here. It was uh, thinking that it would be easy to get back and forth to my home. Well, that's no longer true. I can no longer go back there for whatever time it is. But I'm living in a very nice Jesuit community here, a very good community, wonderful people, 16 people. And it's a beautiful campus. We can walk on the campus, of course. So, and I came to do writing, so I wouldn't be doing anything different now than uh, so I'm doing the same thing that I was supposed to be doing, and that's okay. So
right.
that's fine. Um, but it's it's this is a strange time, and it's a very difficult time, and it's hard. I'm in contact with so many people. Video contact is wonderful
Right.
with people. It's great to see people when you're chatting with them. Um, and so that's good. That's a good part of it. But of course, it's, to be constrained, and then the worries, inevitable worries about the people you care about, and for oneself too. It's a stressful time,
Right.
but Easter is
And
coming. Easter is coming. So
yes, and there's no holding it back. There's no holding him back.
that's correct.
uh,
Exactly.
Death
Exactly.
cannot hold him.
There is light at the end of that tunnel, or coming out of that tomb. Yeah. Yeah.
There always is, right? We're so blessed
Right,
to have.
right, right.
Father John, so how does community life look there? Do you have daily mass?
We do. We're very lucky, of course, because so many people are deprived from it, and sometimes I feel guilty. That we have so much, and so we have a regular liturgical life here, and that's really very comforting. And it's a very good community that way. We do adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. I know that's not a Byzantine and Eastern Christian kind of thing to do, but we do adoration of the Blessed Sacrament once a week.
Right.
So yeah, it's a nice community life. Yeah, a very nice, and it's a very good community.
Well, that's really great to hear. I don't know if the guilt thing is like a white male thing or is it a Catholic thing?
Oh, it's white male, it's Catholic, it's clerical. Because
Oh,
we just have an advantage that people don't have, and I know, excuse me, I know an awful lot of people who really, really hunger for being together in church, and celebrating the liturgy, and they can't. And it's there's an awful lot on the internet, but that leaves a lot to be desired. So
Yes, yes. Well, I was going to get to that, the liturgical aspects and I guess sacramental theological aspects of this time that we don't know how long it's going to last. I want to ask you more about that. But insofar as what you just said, before we leave that, your situation, um, I'm just thinking, you know, you made a choice a long time ago to enter and also to make the sacrifices involved with entering the society of Jesus, and now in a time of trouble you have what you know I mean you didn't have throughout your life a lot of things that people would have, you know what I'm saying, in the sense of their family life
right,
and
right, right.
children. But you now have your community, and I just think, uh, as an outsider, um, to your order, um, I think it's wonderful that you have that, and
Yes,
I
yes.
think
I count myself. I try to, even in these difficult times, I really try to count my blessings every day.
I
And
say
it's wonderful to have that. I mean, sometimes people make a lot of what we've given up, and that's true. There, of course, there are things that people who enter religious life, like yourself, have given up, but there's an awful lot that we get too. So I never want to exaggerate what we've given up.
no, no, you didn't. I did. I didn't exaggerate. I wanted to say I think it's well deserved. I know that in our popular culture, anyway, it's different in different little microcosms, but you know, priests and more recently, Catholic priests will get a lot of bad press. And while it might be deserved by some people, I, I have had a very good experience and can testify to all of the kindness and also inspiration that I have received from living models, both of scholarship and prayerfulness and just charitable, open
Mhm,
hearts, very
mhm.
sharing. Of course, our common friend, we will get to
Yes, yeah.
reminiscing about Father Taft. However, I just want to say it's wonderful to see you doing well in your community as well. So,
Thank you.
um, I'm getting to this second question, which you've already touched upon a bit. I want to say, so as a priest and as a well known and accomplished liturgical scholar who has written and taught also extensively on the liturgical calendar and specifically on Lent and Holy Week and Pascha,
Right, right.
also have videos as far as I know, but I haven't seen them
Yes, yes,
about
yes,
this.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I do too, so the competition never sleeps.
Good.
So my question is, as someone who's done all of that, you must find this year's Lent specifically, and Holy Week quite different, perhaps from any that we've had even in history that you know about, right? So could you share with us how you find that the present situation is affecting your, specifically your experience of Lent and Holy Week, this high season,
Right.
and perhaps you can share how you think it is affecting sort of the Roman Catholic Church at large.
Sure, thanks. Normally I would be in the parish during Holy Week, because as a professor, I serve on the weekends at local parishes, couple
Really? Oh,
regularly, and
really?
so I would be either presiding or helping at a parish, and so that would be my normal pattern. I live in a what's called a Jesuit formation community normally, and we don't do the Holy Week services except for morning prayers and vigils on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We do that together, but otherwise everybody goes to parishes because that's really where the celebration of the Triduum belongs, in parishes. Sundays we don't go. We don't have our own Eucharistic liturgy either. We go out on Sundays. So Even the students go out. Um, but this year is very different, right? Because we're bound to home. Here at the College of the Holy Cross, we weren't going to have the Triduum services because so many people would be away even in normal times. And we were all going to go out to a local Trappist monastery, St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts. As a community, we were going to go and join the monks for the Triduum. Of course, that's not possible now. What we're doing is, of course, we had Palm Sunday Mass 2 days ago, and then we'll have Holy Thursday liturgy, Eucharist, um, and then it's a little different for Roman Catholics this year because there's no procession of the Blessed Sacrament. Normally, at the end of the Holy Thursday liturgy, we have a procession of the Blessed Sacrament to a place of repose. But the directives this year, the Vatican put out a set of directives about 2 weeks ago, stating very clearly what we're supposed to do and not to do. And part of those directives were that the Blessed Sacrament was to be placed in the tabernacle. There's no foot washing for obvious reasons, right? The foot washing will not take place. On Good Friday, we'll gather again for the liturgy, the sacred liturgy of the Passion, and there we'll do the whole liturgy except and I have the privilege of presiding at it, except for the people will not kiss the cross. The presider does, the celebrant, pre-celebrant does, but everyone else will have come up in reverence by a bow,
Oh,
because
listen,
obvious reasons,
you
you know.
don't do pre-sanctified on Holy Friday?
And then after yes, and then after the adoration of the cross, then we receive communion from the pre-sanctified. Right.
And exactly how are they doing that, hygienically? How do,
Well, we just we actually we and because it's a community of priests here, we pass the paten with the consecrated hosts on them around, and on normal masses only the priest celebrant receives from the cup, and um, uh, others forego the cup. It's a kind of a penance, fasting,
yeah, yeah.
for us, but because normally we would receive from the cup. And
You
then on Holy Saturday, we're not having the vigil. In fact, the rules that came out of the Congregation for Divine Worship and Discipline of the Sacraments from the Vatican state explicitly that seminaries, monasteries, religious houses are not to hold the vigil. That's the preference actually in our books in any case, because really the vigil belongs in parish churches and cathedrals. So in any case, we're not doing that. We'll do evening prayer instead on Holy Saturday, um, and then on Sunday morning we'll celebrate the Eucharist together.
right. Um, I have two questions that come out of that very interesting, situation that you've described. And you, as someone who is so famously, specializes in urban worship and
Oh
cathedral
yeah.
rites. I've already told my viewers about your, a lot of, well, it's hard to cover your whole CV, but um, anyway, I want to say, what is it about, uh, number one, these are two big questions. Uh, Number one, what is it about those liturgies that really belong in, not in the, isolated monastic setting? And number two, what is it about the Jesuit order that some have said is sort of like not very big on liturgical prayer in the same way that certain other monastic communities might be into it? There's a
Mhm.
different kind of, uh, maybe I'm using the wrong words, but there isn't a certain tension between work and, the ora et labora. There's a certain,
Yes, yeah, yeah. I that's yeah. Well, I'll get to the second one, but the first is, I mean, really, the liturgy is by its nature communal, right? So we know that from it's the very nature of the liturgy. We know that from the very beginning. I mean, look at something like 1 Corinthians 11, where St. Paul is so uh, committed and adamant about the unity of the body of Christ, which seems to be even at that early date, right? They had problems with that. So the fact that people have had problems throughout history, that's no surprise. So the the liturgy is so fundamentally communal for various reasons. And actually, I'm working a lot on this subject right now, on the subject of what in the Western Church we call mass intentions. People making mass offerings for a mass to be celebrated in memory of someone who's died or for another purpose. It's a fascinating subject and a very complex one. But it's also related to the development of things like the private mass, which is a very much an anomaly in the Western tradition and still practiced today in a way. And it's a pity because it is an anomaly. Uh, Now, I mean, with the current crisis, I think I'm going a little off your topic, but
No, no, this is very interesting.
okay. And so in the current crisis, many priests are celebrating privately and putting it on, putting it on the internet for the sake of their parishioners. I mean, I can appreciate that. I'm hoping that people do not think it's a good substitute for gathering together because of the nature, going back to the nature of the liturgy, which was, of course, so re-emphasized by Vatican II. Not nothing new, but extremely important and re-emphasized by the council. Yeah, I'm a little afraid that the current situation might lead to some bad habits.
Uh,
Um, but
you know what? Because in our Byzantine rite, we have never had. We're like pre-reform, if reform ever happened. Also pre-enlightenment in many ways, but we're like pre-conciliar in that it is very much a spectator thing. And I hope none of my viewers will be upset for me saying that. I mean, we have a tendency because of the way it's set up. It's systemic, not because people aren't praying, but people are. A lot of what's happening is what, like pre-Vatican II, liturgy in your neck of the woods. They're praying during the liturgy, but not
right,
right. The
praying
liturgy.
the liturgy, right? No, I understand that, and yeah, so I am not a Byzantine, and I'm loath to criticize the Byzantine tradition because it has so much to it, so much that's valuable to it.
No, no,
Uh,
I'm not criticizing the Byzantine liturgy. Actually, no, it's
right.
not.
But the
It's
way it's
yeah,
celebrated, right?
it's not my point. But what I am saying is that it's very interesting to me your insights, your pastoral instinct to say, um, I'm concerned that this might, because as far as I can see, perhaps also from a pastoral perspective, not a priestly one, that tendency to be a like sort of a consumer of a
Right.
spectator, like you have to put on a show for us. It can't not be magnified through the screen.
Right. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. So the show aspects, yeah, that's very problematic and danger. And I think you put your finger on something very important. You know, we live in an intensely consumeristic society where everything gets commodified, and and that's just the air we breathe, cultural air we breathe. And so, the church, I think, the church needs to struggle against that. And the church has to be very countercultural in that sense. Um, but yes, I mean, I do wish that the Byzantine liturgy would become more participative. But I've seen places where it is. I'm sure you're familiar with New Skeet Monastery
I don't
in
I
New
don't
York.
really want to go off on that whole
Oh, okay,
active
okay,
participation. I
okay,
mean, because I only meant that in the specific problems arising from,
okay.
it's
Fine.
the best people have got to maintain a connection with their priest also and to have some semblance
Right, that's true.
of
Yes, yeah,
right.
yeah.
But the liturgical doing, because you can do. by watching the screen, it also limits what you yourself could do. Like, say, if you would process in your own house with your family,
Right, 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 right.
gospel book.
I participated in a lay-led liturgy of the word the other day from my parish in Lexington, Massachusetts. It had about 65 participants. I think I was the only priest who was part of it, but I was not leading it. It was the people themselves who put it together. And we had a virtual procession. You know, people had, like you have palms there behind you, people had some palms in their hands. And you know, some of it was a bit silly, but it was their attempt to participate. And that, I think I applaud that. Yeah. And I
Right.
applaud the ingenuity of lay people at this time, at this difficult time,
Yes,
because
that's
another thing, a good benefit is that we might be learning how much responsibility we all have to take
right,
for
right.
our
Good
prayer
point.
lives and for our worship, and that it's not just up to the clergy; it's up to all of us, or to the religious. It's up to all of us, and so that might be a hidden benefit. You know, you have to look for the silver lining everywhere.
Sure. As Americans always do, right?
Well, maybe.
I think it's a very American to be sort of,
Well, it's also Christian to live in hope, you know.
yeah, we expecto resurrectione mortuorum, right?
Right,
Like,
right,
we have
right,
a good expectation, not we're not expecting around the corner doom and gloom as Christians,
right,
right?
right, right.
So listen, I did not forget about that other question about Jesuits and sort of the prayer rule. I'm not really sure.
Oh,
I forgot what the answer to this is, but I know there's something about it that's interesting.
yeah.
I want to say there I do have a connection to it because when I encountered first Father Taft and I became his graduate assistant and he was directing my dissertation, um, I did not expect to learn like about something about monastic spirituality from a kind of Jesuit, how could I say, contribution to uh, an impasse that Palamite monasticism, where, whence I came, um, really doesn't have, because Gregory Palamas himself, he abandoned his studies before finishing them in order to have sort of, well, an oversimplified rendition of his life is that in order to have that one track, constant, like hesychastic, one focus on the one thing needful. So it's not really explicitly said, but in at least in my lived experience of being, I was very zealous kind of novice, and it's when I began to study, it seemed like this is contradicting or not in line with prayer, And when I
Okay.
met Father Taft and the kind of Ignatian approach, from what I gleaned, I never did a proper, like a retreat, or I never participate, we're not allowed to have,
Hmm.
we don't cross certain lines, but I was fascinated and more just by Taft's lived example saw that there was no tension between his prayer life, his just being very much, the man who read almost the entire New York Times every day, and celebrated the Divine Liturgy every day. And the way he loved to say that he dedicated his Sunday mornings to the Judeo Christian heritage because he read the New York Times and celebrated. Um,
Yes.
you know, but anyway, all of that was in one whole human being, very much like in God's army, very much in the Jesuit thing, but it really encompassed that whole, you know, real 100% kind of monastic belonging to church, and to living in Christ. So, what I want to say is, you do have, in practical terms now, let's just get back to what you said about your daily schedule. You
Hmm.
know, you don't overdo it sort of with the.
Right. So just a brief explanation. So in the 16th century, which was a time that needed a lot of Catholic reform, but as everybody was in agreement about that pretty much. Of course, the Protestants in their own way. but the Catholics too, and they knew that they needed reform. Very much, Saint Ignatius of Loyola founded very reformed order called the Jesuits, and the needs were such at the time that he abandoned communal recitation of the divine office, right? Or what we call today the Liturgy of the Hours. And it was so, as our friend Father Taft said, used to say, so that the Jesuits could spend, 4 or 5 more hours um, a day on the streets or doing their apostolic work, which was so much needed. Um, so that was the 16th century, and that was a good solution for the time. There were some other religious orders, uh, never, ones that didn't become as famous as the Jesuits, but that were doing the same thing. That was then, and this is now. And as I've learned, as we might get into later, I've learned so much as you have from Father Taft. Um, there's no reason to be Ignatian fundamentalists. The 16th century was the 16th century, and there are many valuable things. The other thing is, in terms of what you were saying about the New York Times and prayer, et cetera, and studies, um, a big part of the spirituality of St. Ignatius of Loyola is finding God in all things. So one can be a microbiologist and a very good Jesuit
Mhm.
because that is part of we understand learning to be part of our mission and apostolic mission. Now, but frankly, and of course, honestly, can there be tensions there? Yes, of course there can be, and we always have to watch out for that, for the balance of that, because sometimes people say my work is my prayer, and in many ways that can be true, but it's not a substitute for prayer as such either.
Right.
So Jesuits have gotten a reputation, and I think this was part of your question, for being very poor at liturgy. There's an old saying, "As lost as a Jesuit in Holy Week." And
I,
Holy Week has the most complex liturgies of the year.
as it does in our right as well.
Yeah. So it's that's funny, and it's not as true anymore. It's not as true anymore. I teach, of course, Jesuit candidates for the priesthood, as I have now for 35 years. And I find more and more they're very serious about the worship life of the church, doing it correctly, not just rubrics, but also pastorally. Even though many of them will not be in parochial or pastoral ministry of that sort, many of them will be teachers or doing other kinds of things. Social, what we call social apostolate, but they are serious about it, and that's a very good thing. So I don't think you'd find as much. And Taft was fond of saying, um, there are more Jesuits with doctorates in liturgy than there are Benedictines with doctorates in liturgy.
Oh, is
Uh,
that a fact?
yeah, well, we're devoted to scholarship and study,
Yeah.
and so, especially in the wake of the council, there were some before the council, but in the wake of the council, with the needs, especially in teaching liturgy, um, the and pastoral needs as well, many Jesuits went and got doctorates, and I was one of what you might call the second wave of people doing that. Father Taft was in the first great wave, with
Right.
many fine scholars of his own time. Yeah.
Didn't Father Taft, I don't want to, you know, bring us off track, but didn't he suggest to you the topic of your dissertation? That's what he told me.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he was right. He was right. I owe an awful lot to him, and I owe him that. I was actually originally planning, if you don't mind the longer version of the story,
No, not at all.
I was originally planning to work on the Anglo-Catholic revival in liturgy in the late 19th century in Britain.
Mhm.
And my mentor, my dissertation director, who was a great friend of Taft's, Father Aidan Kavanaugh,
Mhm.
he and another friend, Father Talley, Thomas Talley, Anglican, and I, and Gabriele Winkler, um, another student of Taft's long ago, or co-student with him, were all at a symposium at Dumbarton Oaks, the Byzantine Studies Center in Washington. It was on the Byzantine liturgy. Um, Taft gave one of his best talks there, very turned into a very fine article. I think it's called "The Liturgy of the Great Church," basically on Hagia Sophia. Um, and during that, I think the lunch on the first day, Kavanaugh turned to the group and said, "He doesn't want to do his dissertation on the 19th century, does he?" Speaking about me. And they all said no. So I knew I wasn't going to do my dissertation on that. As it happened, I drove Father Taft back up to New York from Washington, D.C. After the conference. So I said to him, okay, what should I do my dissertation on? And he started throwing out some topics. And one of them, the stational liturgy, was something I had studied in a seminar on Holy Week with Father Talley. I went down from Yale, where I was studying, to New York to study with him for a semester, uh, commuting back and forth. Um, and that grabbed my attention. And he said, "Well, it's a system in 3 different cities, and you might think about doing all of them." And there we were. We were off and running.
Right,
Uh,
3 different cities. Yeah,
so Jerusalem, Rome, and Constantinople.
right.
I was able to write the dissertation, and then he liked it. God bless him. Well, it was his idea, but he liked it. He liked what I did with it, um, and um, and so he offered to publish it. Asked me if Orientalia Christiana Analecta could publish it, which was quite an honor, terrific honor,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, he was extremely helpful to me, and it's a topic that's still very interesting. I still write a decent amount on processions. I just wrote on medieval Latin processions, or processions in the medieval Latin West, for a new study guide, a brilliant study guide on Western liturgy, medieval liturgy. So, and I wrote a long article on processions in the Real Lexicon for Antica and Christentum a couple of years ago. Um, yeah, I still, part of what I do, part of my work, I do kind of theological work and historical work, both. Um, Divide my time between it, and I think in some ways Taft did too. I learned a lot from him about that too. So I still do a lot of that historical work, and a lot of it has to do with processions and things that were allied to the subject of my dissertation.
Right. Well, the way an entire congregation can move throughout real space, right? And the way it can't when we have only virtual possibilities is
Right.
one of the interesting parts of the challenges of somehow our hierarchies also trying to uh, issue also guidelines of how we're supposed to do this, because in our various Orthodox churches there's been some people somehow felt that this is they were holding out, to they didn't want to abstain from coming to church, and they wanted to somehow go around the guidelines, and it's some of it has been a little bit difficult. It's something that shouldn't really be dividing us now when we have a common enemy, the invisible virus, but anyway, finally, even the hard, those who were holding out uh, uh, already, probably when they've been infecting others and one another, they finally closed down, the churches. And there were these guidelines that I found interesting that said, in my specific little church, the Row
Mhm.
Corner, I was very happy, sort of, and curious about the fact that the first hierarch said, put your laptop, because I had also for several weeks now, I've had interviews on this topic or videos on the topic of coronavirus related liturgical issues, right? And so I had asked Paul Meyendorf, actually, was on last week, right?
Mhm.
And so I had asked him, what does he think the bodily position should be when you are, because say in an Orthodox church, not all of them, some of them have pews, but they have a lot of like physical action, prostrations, or but standing. The Russians like to stand. You can't find a chair if if you want. So anyway, and it says in the directive of my church, it says place your laptop or your whatever Kindle, whatever it says, in your next to your icon corner, so you have
Uh-huh.
like
Uh-huh.
quasi iconostasis, right? And like light a candle, and if you can stand.
Yes. Yeah.
So I just, it is a
That
little
is
weird.
excellent. Yeah, that is excellent. And I wish that's very good because I haven't seen those kinds of suggestions for Roman Catholics. And that's very good because when I teach my basic liturgy course, of course, in the seminary, one of my constant themes, I probably beat it to death, but is the embodiment of liturgy and how important the embodiment is. And I think that's a great aspect of the Byzantine liturgy, which when I send my students in this once a semester, I have them go out. I'll give them the choice of any non-Roman Catholic church they'd like to go to compare and contrast with the Roman Catholic Sunday Eucharist. And many of them, I think last time, most of them actually went to the Melkites so they could receive Holy Communion. But some went to the Russian Orthodox OCA Cathedral down in Boston. But most of them went to the Melkites, and they were very impressed by the liturgy. Now the Melkites, unfortunately, have pews. They've been too Americanized in that sense, and that's a pity because. But they were so. But the Byzantine liturgy is so embodied in any case that it was very helpful.
Melkites are really, I find the Melkites are the closest to, at least I sense that their style seems really to be close to Orthodox style. More so, I would find than others in that are in communion with
Like
Rome.
the Ukrainians or
Well, I don't want to antagonize my Ukrainian
right, 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 right.
viewers.
No.
But the Melkites, I love the Ukrainian Greek Catholics. I really do, and I have a lot of close friends there. Da 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 da. But I like Melkite liturgy. I don't really have. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if
Okay.
that I have Melkite friends. Maybe um, is Nicholas Russo a Melkite?
I think he is. I'm not sure.
And
Yeah.
his father is Father Economos Russo. I only know him through Facebook. I think
Uh-huh.
he's a priest. So anyway, I think that they're Melkites. In that case, I have Melkite friends. But in any event, I find, as far as I've been present at several, Melkite liturgies, they seem quite something that appeals to me anyway. So before we wrap this up, perhaps you could share some additional maybe insights or memories about Father Taft, another great Jesuit scholar whom you knew really for so much longer than I did. Share some of your memories.
Well, I met Father Taft 49 years ago, maybe 1971. With the first time he taught in the United States at Collegeville, Minnesota, at St. John's Abbey and University. And I was just finishing novitiate, and so there were only four of us Jesuits there that summer at Collegeville, so we all got to know each other pretty well. And he was always unfailingly kind to me. He had several sides to him. He could appear gruff, as people know, probably know. Um, but he really had a heart of gold. One of the things that, if I may say, that one of the things he liked to repeat that I once said to him was, and we called him Tafty, a name he got as a novice in the late 1940s. Tafty, beneath that rough exterior lies a heart of stone. And he always thought that was very funny because he was funny. He was funny himself, but he was really, but that's not true at all. It's not. It's the funny thing is that it's not true,
Yeah.
um, because he really was a very, very kind person. If you know about his prayer life, you know he prayed for any number of people every day. He prayed a lot for religious women. He prayed a special prayer every morning for women religious, consecrated religious.
Yes.
Um, he was very devoted to the office and to the Eucharist. Um, you know, even in his illness, every day he was there every day, and he was very devoted to his family. Very up on current affairs, as you said earlier. You know, you read the New York Times with great fidelity.
He
Uh,
read the financial section, and you know how he would read.
yeah,
He was a speed reader. I don't know if he himself realized that, but he would watch him read it. He would go down the columns of the paper, and
right.
like he really would retain.
Yes, yeah. And he probably didn't even have no. I'm sure he did not even have any stocks and bonds.
No,
But no, he was a very well-rounded man that way, and he was also, um, you know, he knew how to have fun. He once told me early on, very early on, um, I never work after dinner. Now, of course, in Rome, it's easy to do that because dinner is late.
yeah.
Supper is late. Cena is late. I never work, and it's true because I lived with him for two times, in 1980 and then in 2003, for a semester each time, and at the Oriental Institute. And we never, after dinner, we watched movies or relaxed. You know, he would go back, and then some days a week we would watch movies, but he would never do that. And I adopted that same practice, and I found it's sometimes in an emergency when you've got something you've got to finish it. You can't do that, but by and large, and he knew how to relax. He had a lot of friends, very good friends,
Mhm.
both in Rome and elsewhere. Um, and he was a very faithful friend. And he was a great scholar. You could depend on him being at that desk in that corner of the Oriental Institute Library, 5 days
Daniel
a week.
Daniel Fendicchiano, now he's a bishop, I believe.
Right.
He would say, he would tell me, he's like, yeah, I remember when the big guy was behind me because I also sat at the desk in front of Taft, and
Uh-huh.
Dickion would sit there too, and he was whatever, he was there earlier than I was, and he said I would hear him coughing, spitting, and cursing.
Yeah, that's typical of Taft. Yeah. So yeah, no, but he was a great figure. All great figures have their flaws, obviously, but we all have our flaws. But
No, I didn't mean that as a
the greater the figure, the more obvious the flaws. But that's okay. He was a very good man, and as I say, he was extremely good to me. I know he was good to you, and to so many other people. So, and he was a good model. I've just finished. If I can continue just a bit, there's a memorial volume being prepared. I'm sure you know that, for him in Rome by Stefano Parenti, one of his students, and someone else. Um, and so I decided to write on Taft's turn, which was like from the early 2000s, to using social history in his writings. And it's fascinating how he began. This was always there. I traced it back a little bit. It was always there in his work from the beginning. You could see, but yes, exactly. That book in particular, and then his introduction to his book on the communion rites, the last book that's been published from his great history of the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. But it's a really interesting subject, and he really wanted to try to understand, and this is a little bit in line with the work that I did too, um, in my dissertation. He really wanted to understand the liturgy through the eyes of the people who celebrated it. Uh, and I think that I hope the editors like the the piece for the book. We'll see. Um, I hope they do. But it was a great. It gave me a deeper insight, a fuller insight into the nature of his work. So I see you have his picture there behind you, and yeah,
Yes, I do. I put it up. These are I usually put up Taft, but today, because of you, um,
okay.
and Schmemann for I have a divine liturgy course that's been sort
Uh-huh.
of a monstrosity because it's in its 45th video, and I'm almost up to the epiclesis because I'm doing
Oh,
liturgical units in
uh,
video form. But
I see.
whatever, it's just
Oh,
been.
I look forward to that. Yes, I saw the picture of Father Schmemann behind you. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. Schmann's just there. Well, for different reasons. It's the two pictures I have of. I know Schmemann Taft would not really like for Schmemann to be put on the same shelf, because he really liked Schmemann, but Schmemann was definitely not in the same way a scholar the way Taft was. Like rolling up your sleeves and studying the sources.
Right.
Schmemann was. I talked about this last week, into the big questions and very charismatic, into the big questions, but not
Sure,
really
sure.
into a scholar is really more of a miniaturist,
Yes, yeah.
down to the
Well,
bottom.
Taft could do both, of course. Yeah, and about Schmemann, I use a lot of Schmemann in my own teaching because he does, especially for students from Western traditions, he opens up an awful lot. Sometimes he can be hypercritical of the West. That's silly, but he opens up an awful lot of questions that are important. And
I think that generation was, having the Russian emigres. They end up in the West as they hadn't been before, and there is a desperate, need to assert one's identity and not be assimilated. And I think that benefiting from Western uh, also Catholic, uh, education possibilities. Like Schmemann, if you look at what he says in his introduction to liturgical theology, it's like Gregory Dix, Gregory Dix, Gregory Dix in the footnotes,
right, right, right.
when he gives him credit. So it's, I think that very anti-Western, those moments, like in his Great Lent, where he take it's several pages that he spends trying to uh, assert and convince us that there's no Eucharistic adoration at the Liturgy of the Presanctified. But there's a
Right.
huge moment in the Liturgy of the Presanctified, which is unique in the entire present day Byzantine Rite, where there's a procession with the pre-sanctified gifts that is made in total silence. And our Typicon, in any event, says, even though in Stephanos Alexopoulos' book about the pre-sanctified, I don't think he knows how the Russians do it. But even in the Slavonic Typicon, it says everybody prostrates in silence before the holy gifts. And in his study of the pre-sanctified, we know that for most of history, people didn't actually approach Holy Communion that much at that
Mhm,
liturgy,
mhm,
you know?
mhm,
So, because of the frequency of communion, both in East and West, for most of history not being that frequent, that means that in our rite, there was only that adoration, or what else is it?
mhm.
You can call it something different, but that's a big moment for the Lenten weekdays,
Right,
only to have that.
right, right,
Get
right,
what I'm saying? But
right, right.
Hammond walks right past that and he's like, differently from the Catholics, we don't, I'm not uh, eager to, I've always been Orthodox, daughter of an Orthodox priest. I'm not saying that there's no differences between us, but I see sometimes that there's an unnecessary juxtaposition that's like,
Mhm, mhm,
that's not, as if it would be bad that both our churches, both being Christian, why would it be strange that we would have common um, moments? You know,
yes, yeah, 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 right,
I mean, it's sad that there are differences that make communion uh, not possible as far as that's seen.
right.
Canonically today, but the fact that there are many similarities is something that is really, it would be crazy if there weren't,
Right. Right.
right?
That's right. Although there's a wonderful essay late in his life by Father Taft on communion from the tabernacle, in
Yeah,
which he does talk about. He says, of course, the Byzantines have adoration of the Blessed Sacrament of the divine of the holy gifts, but they do it during the liturgy.
right,
So he
right.
nuances that quite a bit. Yeah.
He was also someone who would smash through the kind of confessional, what he called confessional propaganda. He liked to talk about it that way.
Right.
So he would be um, equally critical about his own order, about his, I mean, he wasn't reckless. he
Uh-huh.
There were certain topics that he was very extra careful about. Um, but he also had a healthy kind of self-criticism, insofar as his own, tradition goes. But I don't know. I think he found a balance. Like when you could see Taft at work with handling a topic, whether it's celebration or what he called fishing in each other's waters.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you know. So again, thank you so much, Father John, for sharing so generously of your time and of yourself with us. And I want to say to you and to any of our Roman Catholic viewers and others who are about to celebrate Easter, Christ is risen, and a happy Easter to you. And Father John, would you have any words for our viewers?
Well, thank you so much, Sister Vassa. I mean, I hope our faith gives us a lot of courage and hope in this very bleak time, very perilous time. But I really appreciated being able to talk with you. That the time went very quickly, and I think we covered a lot of ground. And in response to your Christ is risen, let me say, Vuistinu Voskresis. So, and a blessed Pascha to all of you who will celebrate a week after we do.
Thank you. As soon as you said that, there was that little bell that I think
Uh,
notified you that you got a message, but we had like
uh,
the ringing
that's,
of a bell. All right. So
uh,
thank you so much. Bye.
okay, Mr. Vasa. Take care. God bless you.
Thank you.
Bye.